We're going to go over a little bit of old ground here because I think it's inevitable. When you read the headline that Keir Starmer says that Britain simply isn't working, bosses must get better at keeping the long-term sick in their job. If you wanted a great succinct example of the vacuous nature of our current leadership, there it is, right there in that sentence. Britain simply isn't working. We need bosses to get long-term sick people back into their jobs. Man, come up with some philosophy. Have a big idea, Keir. Don't tick some boxes and curtail the odd benefit here but increase it over there. Don't do any of that, Keir. Come up with an idea. Have some, Keir. You know, give it some large, as they might say. Think. That's kind of the job, the role. It's the only role in government where you don't have a specific department to run. Everybody else does that. You're sitting there at the helm, supposedly dispensing some kind of inner wisdom that the rest of us simply are not privy to. We couldn't even reach those giddy heights of brilliance and intelligence and philosophical thinking that somebody like a Prime Minister can do. That's surely the job, sitting there under the gaze of an old study lamp in the middle of the night in Downing Street, in a creaking leather chair that has seen the buttocks of Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher upon it. That's the place you're meant to sit there and say, I've got an idea. I don't get that. What I get is vacuous platitudes like that. Britain simply isn't working. That's it. We've got to get better at tackling the long-term sickness. The PM is promising an overhaul of job centres. They'll send more NHS staff to areas with the highest rate of worklessness. Spoiler alert, by the way, worklessness is not actually officially a word. Did you know that? These are under plans to deal with unemployment and growing sickness. Let's just get a measure of the problem. If you've missed the enormity of these kind of numbers, we have 2.8 million people who are off work through long-term sickness. 2.8 million people are long-term sick. Are you believing that? Not in the conventional sense. And clearly some of those people, and this, by the way, I always have to put this caveat in, there are people who are genuinely sick. There are people who have whatever illness, disability, who are literally unable to work. That's a given, all right? Nobody is going to have a pop at those people. Nobody is going to be suggesting that this is about getting back in the saddle. I mean, if your legs are not working properly, you have breathing difficulties, some other issue, deep-seated traumatic problems, bona fide psychological illness, all of that, we know that, OK? But I don't believe there's 2.8 million people in that position. So this is the figure we've got to look at. Spending on sickness benefit is now projected to top 100 billion by the end of this Parliament. Often when you hear a figure like that, you're expecting it to end with the story that it's by 2050 or 2060 will be spent. No. By the end of this Parliament, 100 billion. Now, that is more than schools and the police and the courts combined. It ain't that far off from the NHS budget. 100 billion on people who can't go to work. Do you trust Keir Starmer to tackle worklessness? And what is behind this, by the way? Look, I've said this many times. There is a pandemic component to this argument. And I think what the pandemic did, there's no one answer. Let's all agree on that. So there's lots of different sort of tentacles to this one. So during the pandemic, I think some people got used to the idea that going to work, they had a kind of an epiphany, if you like. Not a good one, but an epiphany that, you know what, I like not working. And the thought of going to work makes me a bit sad, makes me unhappy. So therefore, I have a mental health issue. Well, no, you don't. You just don't want to go to work. I understand why some people don't want to go to work. I think lots of our fellow country people over the years would rather not go to work. I mean, if you won the lottery, would you still go to work? Some would, but probably most wouldn't. So I get the idea that you don't want to, but there's certain things you have to do because, firstly, you might have a family to look after, so you have responsibilities. And as a citizen of this planet, where we have a first world tax-paying system, we get our services through individuals contributing to that taxation. And from there, of course, the world, the country is meant to function. Ain't functioning very well at the moment. That's the general principle. We all have a part to play, and that is literally your responsibility. It is criminal if you are not taking it up when you could take it up. So that's, I think, basic, simple economics. We all understand that. The pandemic threw people into a frenzy of rethink. Do I want to go to work? I've quite enjoyed not going to work, and I've had the furlough thing going on. Imagine that on a full-time basis. I think that happened. I think also, if you couple that with people looking around them going, oh, we spend £6 million a day, putting people up in hotels who rode across the channel, who aren't even meant to be here. £6 million a day, and I'm working for peanuts? We're living in an upside-down world where we've got a government who will spend God knows how much money sending cash abroad in its tens of millions to solve a climate problem in a country you couldn't even pronounce. You have that as well. We're living in a world where the government are spending, people are spending God knows how much on a court case to define what a woman is. I've got more diversity managers than I've got engineers working in your place of work. All of these, I think we've recalibrated. I think the world is upside down, mate. It's completely on it's moved to a weird part of the spectrum. At some point, I'd like to think it will recalibrate. And all of those things come together to form a general view of, what am I doing? Is this worth it? So I don't believe 2.8 million people are off sick. I believe some people within that group are sick and cannot work. And they're the very people I want my taxes to help. But I honestly sense that what is going on, the mental health crisis will exist in some areas. I don't believe there's 2.8 million people in that position. Do you? So what do you sense is behind this, if it ain't that? I think I've reasonably outlined at least, look, even if I'm not 100% right, I think we're sort of onto something here, right? 0344 499 1000. And when you get up in the morning and you go to work, and you might not always like it, and there might be times when you've got stuff going on at home, and it might be a kid's thing, it might be a relationship, you might be worried about paying the next bill, and you're probably thinking, well, I'm going an hour, I'm driving on the flipping M6, or I'm doing a train journey, it's cold, it's wet, I'm working for minimum wage, look at the money that's wasted by them. Why am I doing? I understand the notion of that. But, our forefathers during the war, people were going to work when the Germans were dropping bombs on the place. Consider that for a second. People I always think about my dad shitting up ladders, painting rich people's houses for sod all, basically. Never really had any money, not in any meaningful way. I think the most expensive car he bought would cost about 900 quid or something. Crazy. But went to work every single day because that's your responsibility to go to work. Never claimed to be.